While I do really enjoy the first two Ant-Man films in the MCU, I do think we can all kind of agree that they are on the weaker side of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, compared to movies on the level of, like, Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, those smaller scale movies, like I said, I still enjoy them, I still love watching them, but just in comparison, they're not as big. But as we all know, Ant-Man 3 is currently in development. They're currently filming Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, which will be coming to theaters in July of 2023. And so far, based off everything we've heard about this film, it's definitely going to be pulling a Thor Ragnarok, where very similar situation there. Those first two films were like, they're good. Thor the Dark World, that's debatable. But still, they were good movies. But then you go to Thor Ragnarok and it's just on a whole other level. And that's exactly what we're going to be getting with Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. Not only, of course, bringing back Ant-Man and the Wasp, but now you're bringing in a new aged up version of Cassie Lang to become Stature, go on to join the Young Avengers. We've got Kang the Conqueror in here. We've got Bill Murray. And now, possibly MODOK as well. Which I think would be insanely awesome, because this is a new report coming from the Direct, which doesn't do really that many scoops, but when they do scoops, they're usually, for the most part, pretty accurate. Remember, they were the first ones to bring us the information that Haley Steinfeld was cast as Kate Bishop in the MCU, and everybody was like, oh no, they're a new source, they can't be trusted, but then it ended up being true. And they've been right on a number of other scoops as well, and now they've brought us a brand new scoop saying that MODOK will be featured in a pivotal role for Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. And they don't provide any further details on that, other than the fact that Jim Carrey is not playing MODOK. So, let's talk about this. MODOK in Ant-Man 3. This is something that was actually rumored a long time ago, before we even found out that the movie was called Quantumania. Before we even found out that Kang the Conqueror was going to be in this movie, we were hearing rumors that MODOK was going to be the main villain of it. And we know that Paul Rudd, who of course plays Scott Lang, aka Ant-Man, actually worked on a version of the script for this film, and his version of the script did feature MODOK as the villain. Now, since then, they've obviously done rewrites and did a completely new script and everything, but based off this report from the Direct, sounds like they at least kept elements of Paul Rudd's ideas, including MODOK. And I still remember when I first started hearing reports about MODOK possibly being in Ant-Man 3, I got so excited for that, because MODOK is such a weird, crazy, wacky villain in the comics, but can also be super powerful and a super formidable villain. But again, he's wacky. He's literally a giant floating head with a laser beam headband. Is really ridiculous, but that kind of fits in with the Ant-Man franchise, because it's a more family-oriented franchise with those silly aspects, and I feel like MODOK would fit in really well there, especially considering like MODOK is kind of like a techie villain, and Ant-Man and the Wasp, their franchise is kind of a techie franchise, considering like Pym Particles and Pym Tech and Hank Pym and all that stuff. And MODOK originally was mainly an Iron Man villain, and we've seen lately that a lot of MCU characters have been borrowing from Iron Man's villain and rogues gallery, since obviously Iron Man's dead, so you can't really do much with that. But you've seen some great examples of that, like for example, in the MCU Spider-Man movies, like having Mysterio be literally an enemy of Tony Stark. But I'm also talking about comics Iron Man villains as well, like using the Mandarin in Shang-Chi. And then specifically, when it comes to Ant-Man, using Ghost in Ant-Man and the Wasp, because Ghost was originally an Iron Man villain, but they used the character in Ant-Man and the Wasp. So they could do a very similar thing here and use MODOK in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, which I think, again, would just make so much sense. It would be really awesome to see. But the only thing is, because after we got the report that Jonathan Majors was going to be appearing in this film as Kang the Conqueror, that's when we stopped hearing things about MODOK being in this movie, so we all kind of assumed that that wasn't the case anymore, and they just weren't doing MODOK, and now it's just going to be Kang the Conqueror is the big bad main villain of this movie. But maybe that isn't the case. Because the report specifically says that MODOK is going to have a pivotal role in this movie, which kind of makes it sound like he would have a large role in this and possibly even the main villain. So then how does Kang factor into this? Well, if you really think about it, like I said, everything we've been hearing about this film relates to Kang the Conqueror and the Quantum Realm, which could possibly even be his home, like his home base or whatever. But what if Kang the Conqueror isn't the main villain of this movie and it's actually MODOK? What if Kang just appears here and he has a role that's more so setting up for future stuff, like possibly the Young Avengers, because Kang the Conqueror is kind of like the main villain of the Young Avengers in the comics, so that could be something that's featured here in this film, and MODOK and AIM, Advanced Idea Mechanics, are actually the true villains of this film instead. And again, AIM connecting back to Iron Man once again, the organization that was set up in Iron Man 3. So I honestly really do think that this is true and really hope that it is. I'm just wondering how it's going to work with having both MODOK and Kang in here at the same time, because would it be that MODOK is the true main villain and Kang is just having a smaller role in it, or are they having the same size role, or are they even teaming up and working together? That would make a lot of sense as well. Or also, maybe MODOK isn't even MODOK in this film. Maybe this film takes place where MODOK hasn't even transformed into MODOK yet, and throughout this film we just see him as Dr. George Tarleton, and he's just helping out Hank Pym and all these other scientist stuff, with the science things, and you can see AIM and all that stuff, and then it's setting up for a future as MODOK. That is a possibility I could totally see as well. But then, like I said, going back to who's going to play MODOK in this movie, especially because we haven't heard anything about that, who's going to play MODOK? Well, like I said, the article from the Direct specifically mentions Jim Carrey is not playing MODOK, which the reason that they mentioned that is because back when there were first rumors that MODOK was going to be in this film, the big rumors was that Jim Carrey was in talks for the role. And that's totally possible that maybe he was, but sounds like at least at this point in time that things did not work out, and he's not going to be playing the character in this movie. So who else could play him? It's really hard when it comes to casting the character of MODOK, because you want someone that works both as MODOK, this big, giant, silly, floating head, so they have to have the comedic chops, but also be like a villain at the same time, and also work as that doctor scientist guy, George Tarleton, pre-MODOK. And it's, like I said, it's really hard to come up with things and actors who will fit this role, because it is such a complicated character. Really the main ideas I've seen floated around online, other than Jim Carrey, is Bill Hader, which honestly I could see that happening. I could see that working. I like that. I definitely like that choice. Another one I saw which I thought was kind of random was Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart I think is a really funny guy, but I don't think I could take him seriously though. So I don't know if Kevin Hart would work, but one idea that I've had for the longest time that really kind of started my whole idea of wanting MODOK in live action is Peter Dinklage, who, yes, we did previously see in the MCU in Avengers Infinity War as Eitri, but they could totally bring him back. I mean, they've done this with multiple other characters. We just had a recent example with Gemma Chan, who played Minerva in Captain Marvel, and then went on to star in Eternals as Cersei. So they could totally bring back Peter Dinklage and have him play MODOK. There's some great artwork out there of what he would look like in the role, and I just think he would look really cool, because again, MODOK is a hard character to pull off, because you want him to be big and scary and terrifying and not just like the butt of all jokes, which he probably will be for the most part, but also he's got to have that terrifying presence. And honestly, that artwork of Peter Dinklage as MODOK is absolutely terrifying. So I would love to see him in the role. But again, there's no real word on who would actually be cast in the role. But most likely they've already... Of course, as I mentioned before, this is just a scoop and report from the Direct, which I do think is a really reliable source, but do take this with a grain of salt, consider rumor for now, but I personally do really think that it's true, and I hope that it is true. But anyways, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this absolutely crazy news that we are going to be seeing MODOK, the mental organism designed only for killing, introduced to live action in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. Let me know all your thoughts, theories, and predictions, and who do you want to see play MODOK in the MCU. So anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. Please drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and hit the subscribe button so I can keep you up to date on everything that goes on in the Marvel life.